Good evening and welcome, everybody. Glad to see a decent crowd here this evening. I think the subject is going to be fascinating. Just a quick question. How many of you had heard about Baobab tree rings being used as research for solar variability? Well, I certainly had. Sorry?
I heard of redwood being used.
Really? Okay. All right. I think it's going to be very interesting. But just before we start, I just heard a little tip about something that's going to be special that's going to be happening on Sunday evening. Prominent personality. I was forbidden from repeating the name because I'm not allowed to. A prominent person from Humanist astronomy is going to appear on the Stereo and Planeta radio program on Sunday evening at 7:30.
Which program?
Stereo and Planeta. I think it's on a podcast as well. I think you can get it, I don't know, on YouTube or something like that as well. So those that are interested, you will recognize the person immediately, the guest. But I'm not allowed to say who it is. Okay, so those who want to find out the answer to the mystery need to listen on Sunday afternoon. Okay, so we're going to listen to Pieter Kotze now. Looking forward to a great talk. And I see we've got some relatively prominent astronomy personalities online as well on the Zoom. I'm sure they're going to be asking some very insightful questions for Pieter later on after the talk. Looking forward to it. Thanks, Pieter.
Okay, good evening, everybody. It's a real pleasure to talk to you on a rather strange topic tonight. We all know that, or when you open up an international journal nowadays, you notice that predominantly all papers written or research papers on astronomy and astrophysics is based on data from observations done on remote objects, some of them scattered in the most remote parts of the universe, utilizing very sophisticated instrumentation that are both spaceborne or located on the surface of the Earth. Tonight, I'm going to take another step or a route direction completely orthogonal to that and use the humble tree ring data from a Baobab tree, which can also reveal to us extremely interesting science and information about the closest star to us, the Sun. So, without further ado, we all know that, can we just, the Sun is by far the largest supplier of energy to not only the solar system, but also to the Earth's surface. So the amount of energy that reaches the Earth's surface has a profound influence on climate. We know the difference between summer and winter, and in Humanist is the seasons all in one day. But tree rings played a huge part in the past for identifying solar periodicities. They are actually time capsules of what happened on the Sun over a long period of time. For instance, in the past, we know cosmic rays are bombarding us all the time. As we sit here, a few million particles have already passed through each and everybody's body as we sit here. Luckily, no damage done. But as the cosmic rays enter the atmosphere, it bounces or collides with particles in the atmosphere. And in the process, it creates radioactive isotopes. Carbon-14, for instance, is one. It attaches to the oxygen in the atmosphere, and the carbon-14 is being absorbed by trees. And in that process, we can date and see what the Sun has done, because cosmic rays in itself is modulated by activities on the Sun. When there's a lot of activity, Sun's active, large amount of coronal mass ejections, the cosmic rays are deflected away from the Earth. When the Sun is in a low activity regime, more cosmic rays can enter the atmosphere of the Earth, and in the process, it's been modulated. So it has got a half-life of close to 5,700 years. Another isotope that's been done or studied extensively is beryllium-10. It has a half-life of close to 1.4 million years and is used extensively in ice core rings in Antarctica, for instance, to monitor activities on the sun itself. So what about carbon-13? Carbon-13 is a non-radioactive isotope of carbon and is being regarded by paleoclimatologists as a proxy for rainfall. So why carbon-13? During the process of photosynthesis, carbon dioxide has been actually absorbed by trees in the atmosphere, and there's an active discrimination occurs against carbon-13 and in favor of carbon-12. So during the process of low rainfall, the amount of carbon dioxide available for photosynthesis is restricted to that inside leaves. In contrast to that, like Southern Africa with its low rainfall, lower carbon-13 values are associated with wetter conditions, and higher carbon-13 values are associated with drier conditions, particularly during the growth of the wood in trees. So to link carbon isotope ratios to rainfall, one is therefore restricted to trees that only rely on precipitation as a water source. You cannot use trees, for instance, in the Western Cape or along the southern coast or up into Natal because their feet are permanently located in water. No matter how much it rains or how less it rains, it doesn't influence the growth rate of the tree itself. So any researcher is therefore limited to trees that are located in the savanna regions where only precipitation or rainfall is the feeding form for the trees itself. So in particular investigation, the annual carbon-13 measurements obtained from Pafuri trees in the Pafuri region using 1,000-year Baobab trees, as published by Woodbourne. In fact, I actually stumbled upon this data set just by chance. I was paging through the annual report of Itemba Labs, the nuclear facility near Somerset West, and there they announced the data set for 1,000 years of carbon-13 data that they have identified in the trees. So I decided that's a nice time series. Let's have a look and see what we can find from it. So between 1200 and 1900, I used data to identify the presence of possible solar modulation effects. So where is this Pafuri region actually located? It's on the border between the northern part of South Africa and southern part of Zimbabwe, right inside the savanna region. So Baobab trees only occur in very limited parts of the world. Southern Africa or Africa, we can see them in parts of Australia and one or two other places around the world, but not across the world. So it has been a source for animals or elephants for food, shelter, but also human beings have found some very nice applications for a Baobab tree in the past. So let's go back to the basics of primary school biology. What happens with trees or with plant leaves? There are openings, or stromata are actually pores on plants' tissue, and the main function of it is to allow the uptake of carbon dioxide and to limit the loss of water during evaporation. So during dry periods, the stomata close down, less carbon dioxide from the atmosphere can enter, and less water can evaporate from the plant. So it helped to reduce water loss by closing during dry conditions. And for plants on land, the stomata are actually located underneath the leaves, and for aquatic plants, the stomata are actually located on top of the leaves. So this is the data set that I have available between 1200 and 1900, shows the ratio of carbon-13 to carbon-12. There's a lot of oscillations taking place, and underneath we have the sunspot variation of the sun during the same period. We see very distinct periods or intervals with low sunspot values. It's identified as the wolf period. We get the Sporer period between 1415 and 1590, when the sun activity was extremely low. And then the well-known Maunder minimum between 1645 and 1750, and then the Dalton minimum, which is a very short duration period between 1719 and 1830. So the main aim was now to analyze the data during these minimum periods and to see whether we could identify solar periodicities appearing during that time. So solar activity and sunspots are very closely linked. Galileo, as you know, was the first person to identify.
Not on Zoom, it's fine.
Okay. It all appeared in 1611 with these primitive telescope. Some of these sunspots can actually be the size of the Earth itself. And we see that the sun goes through high activity and low activity, alternating and with different intensities. And associated with that is the appearance of magnetic storms on the Earth. So solar activity, sunspots, and activity on the Earth is very closely linked to each other. So the question is, what caused the Europe little ice age during the Maunder minimum? But the main question is, what happened here in Southern Africa? We haven't got an answer for that up till now. So we know that during this period, the sun's activity dropped down to extremely low periods for almost 70 years between 1645 and the same, and simultaneously the solar output, the intensity of radiation from the sun also dropped quite substantially. And that was the period when Europe experienced quite extensively cold conditions. But I will not ascribe, in my own personal view, is that we cannot ascribe these conditions in Europe just to solar output activities. Volcanic activity could also have played a role, but we don't have any information about it at this point in time. So the next step is to take the data set and encourage it to start confessing in true Father Brown fashion, not like the KGB. It must be a very nice environment for the data to be subjected to. It's similar to listening to a symphonic orchestra. The symphonic orchestra consists of different sections. There's the brass section, the string section, the wind section, the percussion section. And spectrum analysis is a technique to identify the amplitudes or the strengths of the different instruments during an orchestra performance. You look at the time, in the time domain, you hear all the kinds of oscillations, all kinds of frequencies. But we are interested in to know which frequencies have which strength at what time during the performance. So you can easily analyze a performance of a symphonic orchestra using spectrum analysis and see whether the midsection has done its job or not. And you can easily identify which one didn't do its task, what it should have been done. So the spectral analysis that I'm going to apply in the next couple of sections is a technique that allows us to discover underlying periodicities in a time series. Now, there are different techniques, and I'm not going to bore you with the mathematics about it. There are three different techniques that I used in the analysis. The first two techniques, the Lumskagel and the maximum entropy techniques, is just to identify these periodicities were available during the time series, during the time that the rings were analyzed. But we also want to know at what time did a certain frequency appear? At what time during the performance of the symphonic orchestra did the violins play? Sometimes they play and they stop, and then the percussion took over. So we want to know that is, with the first two techniques, it's impossible to identify at which time these frequencies occurred. But with this technique, it's possible to identify at what time everyone played each tune. And that is what the output was for a Lumskagel spectrum analysis. There are 4 different periodicities that could be identified. Number 1, the 11-year Schwabe cycle, which is the sunspot cycle, very clearly. But also we have a statistical condition. It must comply with a 95% confidence level. So you must be 95% certain that this period or frequency did occur. Otherwise, it's a no-go. We also identified a well-known 18-year rainfall cycle. Now, this rainfall cycle has been identified by meteorologists in Southern Africa as one of the periodicities characteristic of the rainfall in Southern Africa or in drier parts of the world, of Africa. Then also, number 3 is the 20-year magnetic cycle of the sun. That is the magnetic field that changes with a period of every 22 years. Because the magnetic field of the sun flips polarity during solar cycles. So every 22 years, the North Pole will again appear in the northern hemisphere of the sun, and the southern pole will appear in the southern pole. And so it repeats itself. And then there's also an 86-year Gleissberg cycle, which is also a very well-known cycle for the sun, clearly identifiable in this spectrum. Now, to confirm our results, we did a maximum entropy analysis, and the same frequencies or periodicities could be identified in the complete section. This is by using the complete data set from the year 1200 up till the year 1900. So again, the 18-year period, which is characteristic of Southern African rainfall, would also be verified. Now, what happened now? Now, the interesting part is what happened during these different solar minimum periods. Which periodicity is stronger and which periodicity is weaker? So the next step was, take for instance the Wolf period. We clearly see the 22-year cycle above the 95% confidence level. There's also the 11-year cycle, but it's below 95%, so it's discarded for all practical purposes. The next minimum or period was the Spurrier period, 1415 till 1550. We clearly could see the 11-year sunspot cycle appearing with a high level of confidence. Then the Maunder minimum period. That is the period that is interesting for us to analyze, because that is the period when the climate in Northern Europe was extremely harsh. And here we see the 22-year or the 11-year period disappearing. The 18-year period appearing. The only time that it appeared during all these different solar minima, and also the 22-year magnetic period. So that indicates to us, as we see further on, the 22-year and also the 18-year. So that indicates to us that during that Maunder minimum period, when Europe experienced such cold conditions, in Southern Africa, we had a much wetter conditions. So much more rainfall was present during that specific time. So that is all we know what happened here in Southern Africa from the tree rings of the very humble Baobab tree. And during the Dalton period, that is a very small and lowish period also in the sun's history, the 22-year period was quite dominant. So let's see how our spectrum analysis performed using wavelets. That is the technique where you can identify at which time in the time series a certain periodicity appeared. This is for the Spurrier minimum. We see again only the 11-year cycle above the 95% confidence level, and that was closely between 1500 and 1540. So for 40 years, approximately, the 11-year cycle was present. The 22-year can be seen, it's approximately in this vicinity, but much below than the statistically significant level, in compliance or in support of our previous analysis. If we look at our Bafuri trees, carbon-13 between 1640 and 1720, we see, okay, here's the 11-year cycle, but below the 95% confidence level. The 18-year is also present to very close to the 22-year, and that is the dominant part of the spectrum in this, for this particular part in Southern Africa. So in order to verify and to see whether these results are compliant with other carbon-13 measurements at other locations, I could identify a tree in Ethiopia. This is between 1750 and the year 2000. The 11-year cycle was very closely or very prominent. The 18-year, it barely makes it. It was trying its best to below or above the 95% confidence statistical level, but couldn't make it through. But also the Gleissberg cycle was present. And then in KwaZulu-Natal, there was another tree, not a Baobab tree, also between 1750 and the year 2000. The 18-year cycle, very dominant. That was to be expected because in Natal, as you know, apart from the rain, the trees are standing basically in swampy conditions, and it will record the rainfall or the rain and the wet conditions under all circumstances. So what can we conclude from this investigation? The results obtained show strong evidence for the presence of solar cycles in our carbon-13 measurements from the Bafuri Baobab trees in Southern Africa between 1200 and 1900. These isotope values are regarded by paleoclimatologists as a proxy for rainfall in a particular area. And the results obtained in this particular research project can be regarded as the first identification of prominent cycles in carbon-13 tree-ring data in Southern Africa. Before this time, there were also ring data or other investigations, but not on trees in this particular region. Of particular interest, therefore, is the behavior of the sunspot and magnetic cycles during the different Wolf, Spiller, Maunder, and Dalton minimum intervals. So what is the significance of the findings? It shows for the first time that Baobab trees or tree ring data series in fact contain 11-year, 22-year, as well as the Gleissberg solar periodicities. In addition, the influence of the different minimum periods between 1200 and 1900 could also be clearly identified in the carbon-13 data for the first time in the southern hemisphere. These findings are valuable for our broadening of our general knowledge of solar activity in Southern Africa, and will also help to investigate of importance to solar influences on climate variability. These are the two publications that I wrote in the international journals, one in the South African Journal of Science, and the other one was in the Journal of Atmospheric and Solar Terrestrial Physics. So on that sunset picture, thank you very much. That's the end of my work.
Just quickly before the questions, I remember that I sat down and I forgot to properly introduce you. Can you just briefly explain to the audience how many decades you did research at SAMSA and your quick background?
Well, quick background. I don't like to talk about myself, but that's about the worst thing in the world to do. But basically, I was a research physicist for 40 years, which include almost 10 years at Pelindaba at the nuclear facility in Pretoria, and then for 30 years at SANZA, which is now called SANZA, but when I arrived here, it was called the Hermanus Magnetic Observatory and was called different names by the local people, the Veerhuis or whatever, luckily not the Spookhuis. And at the moment, I'm appointed as an extraordinary astrophysics position at the University of Northwest in Potchefstroom at the Center for Space Research. And that's what you could see in the beginning of my introduction. So today I'm doing my research as a hobby. No stress, no pressure, nothing at all, just for the enjoyment of it. Thanks.
Oh, yes, please. Sorry, I know nothing about astrophysics or physics. I graduated with the physics as a major in Stellenbosch, but that means nothing. But I didn't understand an awful lot of what you said, but I have two questions. Firstly, did you start with the periodicities and then try to find whether there was a link on Earth and therefore go to the botanical record, or did you start with the botanical record and find something strange there and then be able to relate it to something? My second question, which is more of a botanical nature, is that I understand the baobab is not even a tree, it's a succulent. And does it have tree rings?
Yes.
Repeat the question for the
The question was whether I started off with the periodicities as a starting point, or whether I used the botanical record or the tree ring record and then identified the periodicities. And the second question was whether baobab trees indeed have tree rings. I can confirm, yes, they do have tree rings. And they date, there are 1,000, this one was 1,000 years old and was used extensively by Itemba Labs to measure the ratio of carbon-12 to carbon-13 to carbon-12 on those tree rings. Your first question is, no, I didn't start off with the periodicities. I start off blank. I just used the time series record and subjected them to my mathematical encouragement, no torture, only encouragement to confess in a very quiet, peaceful environment. And that was what emerged from the data. So I didn't have any, I know those periodicities is what I would like to see, but I didn't start off and say,
Are there people doing this work in Ethiopia? You mentioned an Ethiopian tree that presumably would also a Baobab.
No. So there's a different tree. It's a different.
And somebody else was extracting the data from the tree ring.
Yes, they got the tree and they transferred it to a nuclear facility to identify the ratios. But as far as I know, there's no publication, to the best of my knowledge, on tree rings in Ethiopia to identify the same periodicities. That is what I could find on my database, what was available and at my disposal. So as far as I know, nobody has done any carbon-13 analysis in Southern Africa.
I'm not surprised. For us lay people, it's awfully esoteric.
It could be, but it was just an interesting project to do.
Peter, can one project your results forward from the 1980 into the future? I think you intimated that climatologists are very interested in that periodicity with the weather, if I can put it that way.
Yes.
But how will global warming, i.e. carbon concentration in the atmosphere, affect that?
That's difficult to say, but I think that's my personal, and that is what I think. The effect of the sun will always be there, but it will be swamped and diminished by the rate of change of the climate at the moment due to greenhouse gases in the atmosphere. So it's very difficult to say what will happen in the future because the tree rings might be completely disorientated, so to say, in terms of what is available at the moment with higher concentrations of carbon dioxide. But it will always be subjected to the solar modulation of those effects. But my first feeling is it will be very small. It will not have any effect on climate change at all. In fact, I think climate change has been with the Earth since the start of the Earth. It is not something new. It will always be there. I think in the Middle Ages, when, as I said to Derek, the temperature of the Earth was 2 degrees higher. It was a higher temperature. And that was the time when the Vikings actually colonized Greenland. And when it got colder, they extracted and they went away and say, no, we can't live here. So, but that is just the oscillations that we can identify in the Earth's climate as such. So at the moment, we are going through a warmer period in the Earth itself, which is worsened by the effects of the atmosphere. The energy in the atmosphere is the problem. You get too much energy in the atmosphere, and that's why you get these heavy downpours at times, heavy storms, and then there's nothing in between. So the intensity of the storms are much higher than before due to the more energy that's wrapped or located or trapped in the atmosphere itself. I think that is what we as human beings experience at the moment. But the sun will always be happy-go-lucky, go along with its playing its violin, and you will see the effect of it.
How big a core sample you actually need from the tree?
How many?
Core sample.
No, you only need one tree.
No, but can't you drill a core?
Yes, but the people who did it, the investor was a dead tree. So they will not try and damage a tree. And their own project ended with the extraction of the data. They didn't think, okay, we can use the data to determine more information about it. There was more information locked up in the data as what they actually envisaged.
That symbol before the 13 carbon, is that isotope?
No, it's delta. It's a delta. the small
Delta.
delta, because it's carbon 13 to carbon 12. So it's a delta carbon 13. But it's actually a ratio of carbon 13 to carbon 12. And now they just say it's the delta, the excess amount of carbon 13 in the ratio.
And another thing, but maybe you don't know this because you're not the biologist who did it, but when they call the tree, it's similar to a drill with a hollow center. You go into the tree, you go past the center of the tree, so you can actually pick up where the beginning of the tree was, okay, at the center, when it was first grade, and then out to the thing, because you've got the main tree, then you've got the bark.
Yeah.
So
No, I think they just saw off a section.
Yeah.
Because it was a dead tree, so they could just saw off a complete section like a wheel, and then use that. They don't
only one tree was used,
no, 4 trees.
4 trees.
4 trees.
And did they take all the trees only in one area? Or
This is only one area.
one area. So
The Pafuri area.
Baobabs in Madagascar.
Yes, but they didn't do it
Baobabs
in Australia.
On the other side, somewhere in North Africa, maybe.
Yes, but they're not extensively spread over the whole of the continent. But they use 4 trees in the Pafuri, they called it the Pafuri region. I was never there before. Maybe I should take a trip one day and see what is the Pafuri region. It's like Western Cape or whatever, but they call it Pafuri. Yeah. And those 4 trees were...
The same results came from all 4 trees.
Yes. They used all 4 trees to do the
The
investigation.
region that was more significant than the specific.
Yeah,
factor
and
was
they,
Baobab.
and they had those dead trees in that area.
Yeah.
So they didn't have to damage trees to extract the data. And
So I don't think I understood correctly, but were you saying that, I'm only talking about rainfall now, that the rainfall cycle in Pafuri or South Africa was related to the 18-year cycle?
yes, that's the only, there are several other rainfall cycles.
Yeah.
But that is the cycle that I identified in the data. And that indicated to me that is the only time during all those years that we had a much higher than average rainfall. And that correlated with the extreme weather in Europe. So that is all we can say what happened here in this part of the world during the Little Ice Age in Europe, when the Thames River actually frozen and Stradivarius made his famous instruments.
So where are we in the cycle now?
I can't say. I don't
So
know.
presumably, if there were other organisms that lived as long, you would find some of the things.
Yes, stalactites, for
It's a
instance.
question of finding something that's old.
Yes, that was just a lucky draw that it had at the age of more than 1,000 years. But some meteorologists,
Some old relatives you might be.
that could be. We don't know. But stalactites in caves are also being used, sections for determining the rainfall pattern. I think that is what they initially identified the 18-year cycle in.
Did you say that you did use Madagascar in the African?
No, I didn't use it, no.
Because I've got a book on Baobabs, I think, and it said there's only 2 types of Baobab in Africa, but there are 14 different varieties in
Yes,
Madagascar.
yes.
And they look very different. I mean,
Yeah, they do. But
I
they're,
wonder if that would be a good place for you to take the next one.
I don't know.
Do you have any idea when we started to keep rainfall records in this country? In other words,
in the 1800s.
sorry,
In the 1800s, yes. When it was part of the British Empire to have a global network of stations. That's also when they started the Magnetic Observatory in Cape Town, the Astronomical Observatory, rain and all that kind of. It's from the mid-1840s, if I'm not mistaken. They have rainfall in South Africa.
Can you just perhaps say something again about Stradivarius and the violin? I didn't get
Yes. During that period when it was so cold in Europe, the trees in the Alps grew much slower because the tempo of growth was much smaller. So the trees were of a different character. The wood was of a different character than before or afterwards. And that is the time when Stradivarius collected his wood for the violin and cellos or the string instruments that he built. And that gave the wood a very particular character that could not be repeated again from wood in the same area. So this is a once-off, because he's get good luck to be able to use wood that was under a very slow growth. So his wood was much harder than before and gave the instruments a different character that could not be repeated before.
Peter, do you know of anybody that is doing research on later, past 1900, on the same type of research, but now during this global warming?
I don't know. Because I'm not really a meteorologist, so it was just an interesting physics exercise for me to.
Why did you cut it off at 1900?
That was the age that was available. I think it went past 1900, 1940 or so. It's around about the age that.
The age of the tree.
Yeah, the age of the tree. We were restricted to what the tree delivered to you as a researcher.
We're going to the earlier comments about drilling a core from the tree. Could you not get later information as well?
I don't know, because I was not involved in that project. I only did the mathematics afterwards. I just encouraged the data to confess.
Are you going to share your knowledge and research with any overseas?
It's in my publications, and people can access it in those publications. Those publications are freely available overseas and everywhere. So people can just.
So that will be subject to peer review.
It was already peer reviewed, already accepted, it's already published, done and dusted. Yeah.
Because then someone's got to try and duplicate it.
No, you can't. Okay, they can try, but where are they going to find data for the same period in Southern Africa?
Are you going to extend this to other types of trees?
Not really. I can, if there's, but my aim is to get as long as possible time series. Then you get the best information available.
Good.
But short time, right now.
Are there other trees that grow to a great age, something like olive trees?
Sequoias.
Well, you don't have that in Africa.
Yeah.
Africa.
Sure.
But what would be interesting is the carbon-14 ones. And I know they used convents, because these convents were built in year 1100, and the beams are extremely old. So you can saw off a thin slither at the end of the beam in a convent and extract the carbon-14 from that, which is not available on trees, but it can be in the beam in the roof of these convents.
So the carbon-14, that gives you
Age, yeah, and also solar oscillations. Because it's not rainfall.
cosmic radiation.
It is modulated by cosmic rays and the sun's activities. You can deduce this short-term solar oscillations.
And fossils, which you've had a fair amount of research done and trying to establish.
Yes, that can also be done, but I haven't done extensive work on that itself. Yeah.
We had research in the origin of man and so on.
Yeah, but I'm much more interested in those results from the convent beams.
Yeah.
That would be a very interesting one to look at.
How long did that research take you to come to the conclusions that you did? A year, 2 years, 10 years?
No. About 6 months.
6 months.
Yeah.
So you got plenty of time to do other research stuff
Yeah.
before you die.
Yeah. I can.
Peter, has anybody got a theory about the cause in the sun's physics of the Maunder minimum?
Now, it's all magnetically driven. The whole process of those oscillations and drop in sunspots is driven exclusively by the magnetic field of the sun. And there were some things happening in the sun at that stage that was abnormal.
No.
It could not be repeated. I think you could only do that with mathematical simulations. But you cannot do that on a laptop. Laptop will just
Yeah, it's
collapse.
a bit long ago.
Yeah. Yeah, it's much more extensive. Yes, sir.
Was this driven by your or dendrochronology in the study of tree rings? Or was it the study of the science of tree rings or the study of the sun that drove you to look at this data?
It's more the study of the sun.
Oh,
Yeah.
That's his expertise.
So if I could identify solar secrets in a tree ring, that's the bonus.
Well, hello. I was wondering whether you can also date petrified wood.
More minimum.
Yes.
That's no, I don't know.
But you think it was odd?
But it was odd. We had almost a similar repeat in 2008, 2009, when the sun also went to an extremely low period of solar activities. And the last solar cycle 23, 24, was also very low. And it's all related to anomalies in the behavior of the sun's magnetic field.
There is a correlation to the financial markets.
I was going to say 2008. That's correct. Maybe with Trump there'll be a different reaction.
Yeah, well, that is a different category.
Is there hello? Is there a method of reading petrified wood from petrified?
Oh, no, it's really not necessary, but
Appreciation, symbol of appreciation, and thanks very much for a very unusual talk. It was astronomy because it was about the sun, but it was also about tree rings and weather and all sorts of things that we're also interested in.
Yeah, what is amazing to me is that sometimes people tend to look very far on the other side of the horizon. And sometimes you just stumble upon things that lie right here.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So thank goodness you found that data.
It's just, my Scottish friends would say it's lurking in the heather. So
Thanks very much. And I'll be uploading the recording to our YouTube channel.